Lawrence. I said that with a French accent, didn't I? Lawrence. I'm assuming you're a man, but you might be a woman, Lawrence. When Erickson conducted therapy, the sessions would regularly extend beyond the standard hour. When asked why he did this, he replied that it just seemed to take that long to get something done. Okay. Well, how do you know? Well, first of all, with the, as professional career hypnotherapists, we do have a timetabling. We have clients coming in, or we see them online, or whatever. We don't have the luxury of necessarily of having an hour and a half. Now, it's not true Erickson did this every single time with an hour and a half. It depended on the client, etc., and the interactions. Erickson saw a lot of clients, basically when he was retired, of course, but also when he was working as a professor and, working with university students. So he had a lot of time, more time than maybe we would normally have if we've got a busy practice. So let's just talk about, is the therapy finished at the end of the hour? How do we know? Well, in an ideal world, we don't need to decide. The client will let us know, which is exactly what Lawrence is saying in this question about Erickson. Erickson would wait until he got nonverbal cues from the client, changes in the way the person was breathing, and the work is done. And so he would then say, okay, we bring the client out. Okay. In an ideal world, that would be a wonderful thing to do if you can have the time to do that. However, is it necessary? Well, you have two choices, don't you? You can either say, right, okay, I'm going to finish every hour because that's the way I schedule sessions, okay, and I'll just continue next time. Okay, that's okay. Yes, that's pretty much what everybody does. Another thing you can do is have an hour and a half sessions. Okay, 90-minute sessions. Okay, wonderful. Do that. If you haven't got that many clients, why not do that? That's fine. Okay, and check it out. See what it's like to be an Ericksonian waiting for the client to tell you when the work's done. The other choice is to change the way you work to do everything you need to do within that hour. Now, this is a different matter, of course. Let me explain what I mean by this. Okay. When I first started doing hypnotherapy back in the 1970s, late 70s, 79, I started as a hypnotherapist. And I had a lot of clients to see. So I only had an hour or so, but they were always coming back for following sessions. So I had chance to see them several sessions. I could carry on where I was working the first time. So that fitted that particular way of working, no problem, which is kind of normal. Okay. When I started teaching, things started to change because I was doing a lot of teaching internationally, traveling here and there. And whenever I taught for an organization, somewhere like Canada or wherever I was, I'd always ask to see clients as part of the training program. So they would find clients for me, and I'd do maybe half a dozen sessions, depending on how many days I was teaching. Now, that client, of course, I didn't meet them beforehand. Often I didn't know what the problem was going to be. It's literally fly by the seat of your pants time, and so they'd sit down with me in front of a group. And I had basically an hour and a half. If I wanted to do some therapy, I could decide. And in those contexts, two things happened. In those contexts, I could spend more time if I needed to. And so I could wait for the client to kind of tell me. And that's usually kind of what I did. So I get feedback from the client. But secondly, I wasn't going to see them for follow-up sessions. So I knew that whatever we had to do had to happen in that one session, whether it was an hour and a half. So it changed the way I worked. It meant that I could adapt to a 1 hour session, 1 hour, half-hour session, 2 hour session, or in some cases, whole day sessions. Believe me, I've done three whole day sessions with one client. Yeah, that was very tiring, but good work. Anyway, so I learned to compress what I did. So when I had an hour and a half, I had the luxury of sitting back because I'd learned to compress. And by doing it that way, I'm still getting the results I want because I'm taking the client on a journey where I'm initiating unconscious problem solving or healing more efficiently, should I say, or more quickly than I would have done earlier. And that comes through just being forced to do it, being limited with time and limited with how many sessions I could see somebody. And that taught me an awful lot. in fact. So Lawrence, that and let me just explain how I realized I had to do that. Just a short little history about myself. You know, when I was a kid, when I was young, rather, I went into the music business. First of all, as a recording artist, and then I worked in recording studios. And back then, you know, we're talking late 70s, early 80s. When I became a hypnotherapist, at the same time, I was working in a recording industry. And so back then we had, if you're familiar with mixing desks, and you had so many tracks on the mixing desk. Now they have thousands. You can have as many as you want. You know, you're miking up a drum kit, you could have 10 microphones. But back then it was one mic for the drums, one mic for a guitar, one mic for the bass or whatever. 4. And when I started, it was 8 tracks. And when I realized, you know, then you had to kind of imagine the outcome you wanted way ahead of time, and then get it down on those 8 tracks, usually or 6 tracks, and then you'd bounce them into stereo on the other 2. Then you'd free up another 6 tracks. Okay, and you'd be bouncing things back and forwards with the recording, and unfortunately creating some tape hiss on each bounce. But anyway, that was the way it works. So you're having to think ahead like chess of what the finished product's going to sound like. And so that taught me to limit myself. If I limit myself when I'm learning, then what happens is I become more effective, efficient, faster, and more intuitive. So if you can learn to do that, if you can deliberately limit yourself, there's a benefit in doing that. So Lawrence, I hope that's answered your question.